All right, today I'm gonna talk to you guys about juice. So first of all, obviously, good morning GPC. Let me see. Oh, I gotta pull up Discord on my phone. Let me see the good mornings in the chat, please. Good mornings in the chat. Good morning. Good morning. There we go. Okay, that's sufficient. All right, let's keep it moving. So today's session contents, obviously we got the good morning GPC out of the way. I'm going to talk to you guys about what juice is. I'm going to give you guys some juice examples, which is going to be the main part of this session, and then some closing bits and some juicy resources. On panel, I don't even know why I left this here, but say hi to Mr. Boge and juice. What is juice? Juice is a bit of an abstract term that relates to things that makes games feel good or juicy. Some people who are boring also call it game feel, but you know, we call it juice because juice. It can be used to add impact, make things feel satisfying, and to give feedback to the player. Those are really the main uses of juice. But words are words. Let me give you an example. It's going to be much easier to see. So here, I will show you guys this incredible Unity demo that I created for you guys just for this session. And then we're going to look at like Hollow Knight's whatever dash thing. So here we got my dash, boom, and then here's Hollow Knight's dash. So you can see that one is clearly much better than the other. I'll let you guys decide. Boy's not dead. Oh, I guess Boy is dead. Boy hasn't been around for a while. But in all seriousness, you can see here that the functionality of these two things is like the exact same. Functionally, they do the same thing, and yet one feels like infinitely more like powerful, satisfying, just feels like so much more badass. It feels awesome. And before I get into some examples, I want to ask you guys what you see here. What makes Hollow Knight's dash so much juicier than my dash? And I mean, I'm recording, so if you don't want to be on the mic, you can type in chat, but if you do, then you can also use your mic if you want to. But I see a few things in chat. We have screen shake, definitely a big one. I'm going to be talking about that in a bit. The charge up, yeah. So there's kind of different elements to the charge up as well. The charge has these crystals on the ground. It has some particle effects, which other people are mentioning. It has flashing colors. It has like a whole lot going on. And it also has screen shake when it's ready to go. Atoms? What do you mean by atoms? Lots of feedback, yeah. So it's got feedback. Feedback is kind of like it can kind of be used synonymously with juice. But yeah, so we got a lot there. I'm gonna go into another example here. This is from the legendary Juice It or Lose It talk that these two gentlemen gave, which I'm gonna link at the end of this as well for you guys to watch. I'm just gonna give a warning before I play this though. There is some flashing lights, like really rapidly flashing lights. So if you have epilepsy or if you're like sensitive to that, please tab out. But with that being said, let's check it out.
So it's a breakout clone.
Tons of fun.
Now we're going to enable all the effects. Hopefully.
Are you ready?
So there you can see the pretty big contrast there from the boring little monochromatic breakout clone to this absolute monstrous juice fest. And yeah, sorry for your eyes. The juice can do that sometimes. The juice is a bit too much sometimes. But if you watch this talk later, you'll see they go through one by one all the different types of juice that they add to the game. So I recommend checking that out. Why are you playing again? No. And finally, I just wanted to give a quick important note here. Make sure you juice your core mechanics. Anything that the player is doing very often should feel amazing. Super important. If the main things that the player is going to be doing over and over and over again aren't juiced up, your game's going to end up feeling very like limp and lifeless. So in most games, this is the movement. Try to add juice to your movement wherever you can. You know, particle effects, sound effects, squash and stretch, yada yada. GPC does not condone pouring juice into your eyes. Yeah, that's probably not a good idea. But yeah, movement, killing enemies is another common one in games. Collecting things, whatever it is that your player is going to be doing over and over again, make sure it feels really good. And let's go into some examples of the juice. All these examples, I'm going to be using this little mobile game that I made initially for Game Jam, and this was kind of like a juice experiment for me. I just had like a really simple game concept, and I just juiced it up quite a lot. So first, we're going to look at the infamous screen shake. Obviously, everyone knows about screen shake. So let's check this out. You can see there's actually, I'm going to loop this actually. There's multiple forms of screen shake here. So you can see when I just hit the walls in the level, I have screen shake just to give a little bit of feedback, a little bit of weight to the world. And also, obviously, when I hit these like recharge balls, I get even more screen shake to give the player that kind of satisfying feeling. And it also gives feedback. It lets the player know that something happened, that they hit something with the screen shake. And then also when the player is getting close to dying here, they start shaking more and more and more until they explode. Again, it's a form of feedback. It lets the player know that something is going to happen and that is kind of building up. So it can be used both as like impact, satisfying, and a form of feedback all in one. And for screen shake, experiment with it. Try different kinds of screen shake. But in general, what most people have noticed is that in 2D, it's good to combine both positional and rotational screen shake. It's usually the most kind of like effective, the most like kind of, I don't know, best feeling, I guess. In 3D, you typically just want to stick to rotational. There are some problems with positional screen shake in first-person games because depending on how close you are to an object in the world, it'll look like it's, more or less violently screen shaking. If you have something right in your face and your screen is moving around, it's going to look like it's incredibly strong even when it isn't. And also you can run into the issue sometimes where the player's camera will clip into some of the level geometry, which obviously you don't want. So typically just rotational. Also, if you're doing FPS game, you might just want to stick to roll instead of yaw and pitch because those can throw off the player's reticle position, but play around with it yourself and see how it works. And in VR, obviously, you want to max out the screen shake. You really want to, get that juicy screen shake in VR. Not actually, unless you really don't like gamers, I guess. And then here's an example of implementing screen shake. My examples are going to be really straightforward, just to kind of give you guys an example, but there's definitely other ways and, in some cases, better ways to do it. But simple way of implementing screen shake. First, we have the position and this is just pseudocode, obviously. So you'll get a random direction. You'll have a vector 2 or a vector 3 if you're in 3D, and you get random values between -1 and 1, and then you can multiply that by your strength of your screen shake and add it to position. And I don't know what these numbers you're putting in chat are, but this is pseudocode. I don't need F's on my numbers. And then for our angle, we have just a random value between the negative max and the max angle. And then we can rotate by that times the screen shake strength. Even better is you can try using noise instead of using these random functions. Noise will produce a much smoother and a much more realistic looking screen shake. So experiment with noise functions instead. And if you're using Cinemachine in Unity, it has a built-in multi-channel Perlin noise functionality that you can use. We love noise. So you can take advantage of that. It's quite easy to use. And what else was I gonna say? Yeah, screen shake. All right, next we have camera damping. So while we're on the topic of cameras, let's go with camera damping. So basically this is the camera kind of lagging behind the player. It can help the player feel like they're moving faster than they actually are. You can see here it's a little bit subtle, but you can see the player actually juts out and kind of goes ahead of the camera a bit. And this isn't, obviously it depends on the game. You don't want to have this in every single kind of game, but it makes the player feel faster. If you think about even a 3D game, like a third person game, pulling the camera back can have the same effect where the player feels like they're moving faster. You can do a field of view change, for example. And to implement this, again, a really simple implementation is just using our lovely good old-fashioned lerp function. Take the camera position and the player position, and then pass in our speed that we want to have here defined. So basically, the further away the camera position gets from the player position, the stronger it's going to pull the player back, and it's going to kind of smoothly reset back to the player's position like you saw in the example. And again, if you're using Unity, Cinemachine has damping built in, so you can just use the sliders here, quick and easy. Next up, we have easing, also known as tweening sometimes, and there's a whole bunch of different functions you can use. Again, really great to experiment with these. You can see some examples here, and you have these kind of visuals next to it to kind of show you the effect they have. So you see you have linear, which a lot of people end up just going with linear. A lot of games, I know myself as well, I end up just using kind of linear interpolation, linear easing for a lot of things, but it can be great to experiment with some of these different functions. Just to give you one example, let's say you have like a kind of jelly, your character is made out of jelly, and they jump off of, a platform or something, and they land on the ground. And you want to have them squish and then stretch and squish and stretch, kind of like suspension of a vehicle. You want to have them kind of bounce around. This bottom left one could be great for you, where it kind of, it's super exaggerated. It overshoots and then goes down and back, and it kind of like levels out later on. And you can use this for all different kinds of things. You can use this for position, rotation, scale, color in some cases. So keep it in mind anytime you have some sort of like linear movement. Think about some other functions that you can use as well. And with that in mind, we can look at some squash and stretch. Here you can see, in this case, it's based off of the movement speed of the player. So when the player is still, it's a perfect circle. And when the player moves, if the player is moving slowly, it only stretches a little bit. And then if the player moves quickly, it'll like really stretch out. And for whatever reason, to the human brain, it just makes it look like it's moving really fast. You'll see this obviously in animation as well. I'm sure you guys already learned about it in first year animation, or I guess if you're a first year, you'll learn about it soon. But squash and stretch, really good and really easy to implement. This will depend on your use case, but for my example here, I just had it based off of the player's speed. So I added to the X scale and subtracted from the Y scale based on the relative speed compared to the max. And I put an extra note down here. If the player's movement is based on the cursor position as well, you can just use the difference between last frame and current frame to determine. Basically, it's a way to derive the speed, so you can figure out how you want to scale it based on the change between frames. But super easy and a really like strong and effective form of juice. And another example is just scaling here. So you can see the current score, the high score, and the combo here kind of like pop out of the screen and then kind of slowly ease their way back in. Just, think about where you can add it. Different kinds of like squashing, stretching, scaling. Obviously you don't want to overdo it too much, but think about where you can implement it and it might make your game feel more satisfying. And this was, again, super simple. Just scale it based on the time that has passed. So just, again, we can use our good old-fashioned lerp, or we can use one of the different easing functions that we talked about to just set our scale based on the time that has passed. Next is one that I've grown to really enjoy, especially recently, is hit stop. So I even slowed this video down just to really sell it. It really gives you that like dodge, feeling, you have this kind of effect where the whole game freezes for a moment whenever you hit something, and it really like sells the impact. And to sell it even more, I added some additional stuff here. So you can see the ball turns white and it scales up at the moment of impact just to like really sell it. And it just like, it feels so juicy and like super satisfying. Obviously, this doesn't work for every kind of game, which I'll talk about in a second. If I can go to the next slide. Here's a super simple implementation. This doesn't include like the scaling or the changing of color that I implemented, obviously, but you would just toss that in here. Just set the time scale to 0 or whatever you do to pause the game. Just pause it for a short duration, like, a tenth of a second, or whatever you want to toy around with and test out. And then you unpause the game, and that's pretty much it. In 3D games, obviously this doesn't work as well, because if you're playing a first-person shooter and everything freezes every time you hit something, that's going to feel terrible. It's going to feel like super laggy. But you can still use the kind of principle of hit stop where you'll just kind of apply it to the enemies. So let's say you freeze their animation, or you have a separate, hit stop animation where they kind of freeze for a second. You can have their color flash. You can have them briefly get stunned, so their movement stops for a second, just to really sell the impact of the hit. And those are all the examples of juice that I had lined up. Obviously, it depends on the game. Not every game you make is going to use all of these. By Carter. Obviously, not every game you have is going to use all these examples I showed. And there's a ton of examples, that I didn't show, like in a first-person shooter, for example. Weapon sway and weapon bobbing you'll find in like pretty much every first-person shooter, which really helps sell the movement. But hopefully it gives you a starting point to start thinking about juice, and to give you guys some extra bits at the end, some other forms of juice here. Obviously, not just programming related. particle effects, animations, sound effects, etc. You want to add as many layers of juice as you can. You want it to be visual, you want it to be auditory, and find the juice. It can be hard to think of all the types of juice to implement in a game, because there's just so many things, and it's kind of an abstract it's kind of like an abstract concept that you don't consciously think about when you're playing a game, but they end up making a huge impact. So what I encourage you to do, and what I do, is look at other games in your genre, or even games from other genres as well, and watch closely for the juice. For example, I was making a first-person shooter, and to kind of study for that, I was recording videos of me just doing the general actions, running around, jumping, moving my mouse left and right to look left and right, up and down, shooting, like just really like watch over and over and over again and look for like every little thing that you can see that they do. And you'll notice there's quite a bit there that makes it feel satisfying in the end that most of the time you won't even notice. And of course, experiment. You don't just have to steal from other games in your genre necessarily. You can, think of your own stuff. You can maybe take forms of juice that are commonly used in other genres, try them out in your game. Maybe they won't work, maybe they will, but it's fun to just play around. And of course, I have some juicy resources here. We have the Juice It or Lose It talk that I mentioned before. It's a great talk. I have the Art of Screen Shake, another good one. Juicing your cameras with math. That's a great one as well. It talks about screen shake, camera damping and whatnot. And then the Secrets of Game Feel and Juice, which is a GMTK video. And to close it out, I wanted to ask you guys, what are some of your favorite forms of juice that you guys have either implemented yourself or that you've noticed in games that I didn't mention here? And apple juice is not a valid answer. Orange juice is also not a valid answer. Weapons Way? Yeah. That's one that that was one that I actually implemented as well in one of my games, and I didn't even think about it before. But I was playing around in my game, and I was like, why does the movement feel so garbage? And then I watched, like some gameplay of another first-person shooter, and I realized that like that's what really makes the movement feel good is the weapon sway. Geometry Wars, yeah, dude, Geometry Wars is like a super, like it's an absolute juice fest, especially with the particles. Geometry Wars goes hard with the particles, like the whole level like moves around. Ragdoll, yeah, Ragdoll's a good one as well, actually, yeah. Or like physics-based stuff. Yeah, shakes camera viciously to make the gun sway. That's always a fun one. I do that a lot, even in my own game. I'll just like look up and down, left and right, and just like watch it kind of like drag behind. Screen shake sliders, yep. When reloading, the mag bounce on the floor, yep. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, using kind of physics in there as well. Okay, so having like a user, or like having the player customize their own screen shake settings, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far, but yep, post-processing effects are good too. You can have like kind of filters that are layered onto the screen when certain actions happen. Kind of like in Hollow Knight, they had like the whole screen kind of lit up when he's doing the dash. Head bobbing as well, yeah, you can do that for movement. Obviously, it depends on the game. If you need like precise reticle placement, maybe not as good, but if you're having a game that's just like, walking around doing whatever, then it can be a really nice thing to add as well. You like hit stop? Yep. Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, that's a good point too. Is hit stop is a big thing in fighting games. Even if you look back at like the really old school fighting games, like super super old, they'll do it like it's very blatant. Like you'll hit something, and they'll both just pause. Like everything will just pause for like half a second, and then it'll resume. Like they just super super, they just like really try to sell it. And fighting games since then I've always had it as well. Yeah, controller rumble's a good one too. Yeah, you can have that haptic feedback. Resident Evil, but 500% facial animations. Okay. So it's one form of juice. Have that face juice. I don't see many games do this, but leaving an after image after a dash is super cool. Yeah, like kind of like a not really a trail, but I'm assuming you mean what like Celeste does when you do the dash and you see like Madeline like kind of like fading away at different points of the dash. Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice one. It really helps sell it. Yeah, the rumbling and then bursts when you release. That's kind of like the Hollow Knight example too, where he kind of like starts shaking a little bit, and then when the dash is ready, like the screen flashes and like it shakes and like everything kind of like pops out. Adding sound to anything makes it feel better. Absolutely, we love sound. We love GSC. Sound is like a super super good way. Like if there's one way you can make any game feel so much more like an actual like official proper game, it's adding sound. Like it'll instantly make your game feel so much more real and like proper. Hit markers, yep. Hit markers are classic. The hit marker, like the combination of hit marker with that like signature sound effect that hit markers always have is like the combination is just like, oh, for whatever reason it's just so satisfying. Cool, cool. All right, I think I'll cut the recording there, and we'll go into debug mode. We got. I didn't want to run into the prop jam, but thankfully we still have like just over 15 minutes left. But bye bye recording.